have it on my line. Perfect. Thanks, Shireen. Okay. Right. Good morning and welcome to those in attendance at the remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council on Monday, the 24th of January 2022. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting, and we also have external people joining the meeting to observe through Teams. Please note that external people should not switch on their cameras or their microphones at any point during the meeting. Can all members leave their cameras on but mute their microphones when not speaking? The microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the room or the meeting during consideration of any application. This meeting has been convened in response to 3 requests for review of the decision taken by appointed officer under the Council's state scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. I will now ask Mrs McBain, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed and to conduct these reviews. Mrs McBain.
Okay, thank you, Convener. I'll just do a quick roll call for the recording. So if members can just state that they're present. So Councillor Bolton?
Present. Councillor
Bell?
Present.
And Councillor Mason?
Present.
Thank you. So I'll just read out the procedure note now. So members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replace that with the local review body, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by the Scottish Government's Chief Planner stated that reviews by LRBs should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms McBain. We will now turn to the consideration of the first review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the formation of dormers to the front and rear and installation of replacement windows at 25 Albury Place, Aberdeen, planning reference 210860. We will now hear from the planning advisor, Mrs Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal. I would point out that Mrs Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Mrs Green will not be, however, asked to express any views or merits on the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. And with that, if I could just hand over to yourself.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just share my screen.
That's it, it's there. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so this relates to the request for review against an application that was refused under delegated powers for the formation of dormers to the front and rear and installation of replacement windows at 25 Albury Place. The review's been submitted with all necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant has indicated on the notice of review that no new matters have been raised in the review submissions. In terms of the procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information provided. So I'll provide some background to the case before handing back to you, convener, for members to discuss the case and ask any questions. That's the site location plan. The application site is the upper floor flat within a 2-storey traditional granite semi-detached building. It's at 25 Albury Place, located within the Ferry Hill Conservation Area. And to the front is Albury Sports Ground, whilst to the rear of the building is a garden that's shared with the ground floor flat, and the property is otherwise surrounded by other residential buildings. The overhead photograph there. In terms of planning history, there was an application in 2016 for replacement windows to the whole building, and those were approved as UPVC sash and case to the front with tilt and turn to the rear. Just move on to a photograph of the house. It's the front of the building and the rear of the building. The proposal is detailed planning permission for the erection of dormers on the front and rear of the roof, and the replacement of windows and the blocking up of a window opening in the north gable. The proposed front dormer would be 4.3 metres in length, 2 metres high and 3.9 metres deep, and would be set 700 mm from the mutual boundary and from the bay window, 300 mm below the ridge. It would be contemporary in design and finished in zinc. The front would be glazed with grey PVC sash and case windows, and the rear would measure 8 metres in length, set in, let me just move on to the rear, set in 700 mm each side, and would also be of contemporary design with similar materials. All windows would be replaced with white PVC sash and case, and the infill of the non-original gable window. There aren't any details of materials for that. So in terms of the appointed officer's reasons for refusal, these are stated in full in the decision notice, which is included in the agenda pack. And these make reference to the following factors. Just move through the plans. First, that's the second floor as existing and as proposed, and then the roof plan. I can come back to those later. So reasons for refusal. The proposed front dormer would have a significantly detrimental impact on the character of the area due to its inappropriate design, which is incongruous with the surrounding traditional and historic context. So it's contrary to the Householder Design Guide, and leading on from that would cause significant harm to the character of the conservation area, causing a failure in the duty to have regard to the preservation and enhancement of the character and appearance of the area, conflicting with the policies listed there. And also contrary to Scottish planning policy and historic environment policy for Scotland, as well as the managing change guidance. The appellant's case is set out in the notice of review, along with a statement, both of which are in the agenda pack. The following central points are made. The proposed front dormer would not result in loss of any significant architectural features. Secondly, the proposed dormer is architecturally compatible in size and design with the existing property as per the Householder Design Guide. The proposal is not therefore detrimental to the character of the conservation area. Further point was made that there are several examples of box dormers on front elevations on the street and within other conservation areas. And the proposed materials, zinc and grey roof membrane, are both suitable within a conservation area. And lastly, that the sympathetic alteration makes this property suitable for a young family by creating a bedroom. In terms of consultations, there was no comments received from the Community Council. There were 3 objections. One of these relates to an outbuilding which was part of the original application and has now been removed from the application. Secondly, that the rear dormer would negatively impact on privacy and there would be overlooking. And lastly, that design would not be in keeping with other properties on Albury Place. So I'll now hand back to you, convener, for the panel to decide how they wish to proceed.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Green. In order for us to, we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us in order to allow us to take a decision today on this application. Members will note that the applicant himself or herself has stated in the review document that no further procedure is required before determination. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that a site visit be undertaken, that further written information be provided, or that a hearing be arranged. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener. I hope there is enough information, although the question I'm going to ask might reveal that a site visit might be required.
Okay, do you want to ask that question just now?
Yes, thanks, convener. So privacy is considered a material consideration. So my question really is, is it possible to using Street View or Google View just to determine the line from the rear of the property to 146 Bonnecourt Street, which is the property in question that will have a privacy issue?
I mean, it's not possible to use Street View because that would just be on the public side of the building if you wanted to see the direct line of sight. I think the distances are detailed within the delegated report, but the actual line of sight, no, you wouldn't be able to see that on Street View.
What about if we had, the overview with Google Map? Sometimes I know that we saw one, if we use Google Maps to give like an overhead, and we could maybe point to where that is in relation to this one.
Yeah, let me.
Should we have a look at that, Councillor Bell, and then we can decide if you then still are not content?
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. Yes, I've got all the necessary drawings here and so forth in the pack, but it's difficult to tell.
Right, I'll just get that. Sorry.
That's okay, don't worry.
Well, there is actually there is an aerial view in the pack on page 9, and it is possible that there's enough information around page 9 and page 11 and 12 that we could maybe deduce whether this privacy thing is an issue.
So are you content then that you have sufficient information?
Yeah, I think thinking about it now, there's probably enough. If we can actually deduce this line of sight. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm not getting the.
Don't worry.
No, it is difficult to get the things out.
Okay. Councillor Mason, do you?
Thank you, convener. I think I have sufficient information at the moment, but I mean, we'd be interested in some guidance in terms of a way forward, if that makes sense. In terms of, I see a sort of split decision coming up here between the back and the front.
All right. Okay. I'm content that I have sufficient information in front of me. I know the area reasonably well, and I have recently driven past the particular property to have a look. So I'm content, and I was aware, obviously, that the applicant hadn't requested a site visit, so wanted just to give myself a bit more of a visual. So I'm quite comfortable that I have sufficient information. So we'll proceed with it under that guise that we have sufficient information to determine the application today. Okay, so given that we're going to move ahead, I'll now sorry, I'm just looking at something that's in the report. I want to just check. Okay, no. As members feel that they have sufficient information, we'll now hear from Mrs. Green on the relevant policies and considerations for the review. So over to yourself again, Mrs. Green.
Okay, let's share my screen again. Okay, so consideration in terms of policies within the adopted local development plan, sites zoned under policy H1, where proposals for new development will be acceptable in principle if they, firstly, do not constitute overdevelopment. Secondly, they do not have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area. So it's for members to consider what they consider the character of the area to be and determine whether this proposal would adversely affect the area, which is part of the conservation area, and harm the amenity currently afforded to residents. Third factor, loss of open space. There isn't any open space affected. And the fourth criteria relates to the supplementary guidance, which is the householder development guide in this case. And we'll come back to that. The next policy is D1, Quality Placemaking, and that contains 6 criteria for consideration. Distinctiveness, whether the proposal would create a welcoming environment, safe and pleasant, easy to move around, adaptable and resource efficient. Policy D4 that relates to the historic environment and states that the council will protect, preserve and enhance the historic environment in line with national and local policy and guidance. And secondly, it offers support for high quality design that respects the character of historic environments and conservation areas. Moving on to the householder development guide. This contains various general principles. Dormers should be architecturally compatible with the original building in terms of their design and scale, etc. They shouldn't dominate or overwhelm the original building, remaining visually subservient. Extensions shouldn't result in a situation where the amenity of neighbouring properties is adversely affected. Approvals predating the householder guide should not represent a precedent. And on non-listed buildings and conservation areas, Non-traditional style dormers may be acceptable on the rear. They're looking at Scottish planning policy that sort of reiterates that proposals in conservation areas should preserve and enhance the character of the area. Historic environment policy, there are various principles. Two of them are particularly relevant. The second one, decisions affecting the historic environment should ensure that its understanding and enjoyment as well as its benefits are secured for present and future generations. And the fourth one, changes to specific assets and their context should be managed in a way that protects the historic environment. Moving on to the managing change guidance produced by Historic Environment Scotland, in particular the guidance on roofs. The key messages emphasise the importance of roofs as elements of buildings that help define their character. The significance of roofs being derived from factors such as age, shape, pitch and materials. And also the addition of new features to principal or prominent roof slopes should generally be avoided. New dormers and roof lights should be appropriately designed and located with care. Moving on to the conservation area character appraisal. Just show the plan with the site shown by this arrow. It's fairly centrally located within the conservation area. The strengths are identified as or include the majority of buildings being well kept with original materials intact and the existence of high architectural quality. And the threats include the cumulative impact of small-scale alterations such as windows and extensions. So looking at points for consideration, the zoning policy is obviously H1. So do members consider that the proposed works would adversely affect the character as set out in H1? And secondly, the relevance of the householder design guide. Further consideration in terms of the historic environment, do the works preserve and enhance the character of the conservation area as required by the national and local policies? And in terms of design, is the proposal of sufficient design quality and appropriate to its context? So I'll hand back to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Lucy. Could I ask Councillor Bell, do you have some questions for Ms. Green?
Yes, Colleen, I do. Thank you. So if we look at the west elevation of the property first of all, and if we look on page 9 of the slide pack, if you could perhaps bring that up on the, if you could share that.
Yeah. Let's get to that.
Thank you.
See that? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
is that the right?
No, it's actually so
number
so
9.
Yes, slide 9. It's actually the overview. Sorry, the aerial view. So it shows a red dot and a blue dot on the roof. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, yeah. So can I just confirm then that the red dot is actually 25 Albury Place and the blue roof is 146 Bonaccord Street?
I didn't actually put the blue roof on, so okay. I need to check that.
All right.
146.
I'm just trying to establish the line of view.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clever.
Right. I think the I think the blue roof is the one next to that.
Yeah, there it is. One
Ah.
person is there
Yeah, so it's directly
behind.
behind.
Okay, so that's just a rogue blue roof, is it?
Looks like it.
Yeah, that must be on the overhead that I added the pink dot, but not the
Okay.
blue roof.
Okay, then. So 146 Bonaccord Street is actually immediately to the south of the blue roof. Yeah, that's where your arrow is hovering. That's 146, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we now look at slide 11, so that's 2 slides down in the pack. Yeah, that's the one. So there's actually, there are a few windows there. And I'm thinking now of the larger window to the right of the picture. I'm just wondering what the line of view of that would be to 146. I'm just trying to see whether, just trying to establish whether these new dormers would actually give a more direct view into the bedroom that Mr. and Mrs. Eggerling claim is their daughter's bedroom, and how it will impact on her privacy.
I mean, I guess that window would be in a direct line, but if you're looking from a dormer, you'd be looking down on it.
Yeah.
Slightly.
Yeah.
Although
So
the distances involved are longer than we would normally identify as a cause for concern.
You think it's longer?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Right.
think the report says 18 meters.
Okay, so what distance, I'm sorry, would you consider to be?
We would normally look at sort of 9 meter length of each garden, so 18 meters between interlooking windows would be a sort of rule of thumb if we were looking at applications.
So what distance do you think we're actually considering there?
I think the report says that we're looking at 18 meters to the boundary. I can just measure that. Yeah, I mean that's 17. It's showing up there.
Okay, so it's double. So it's double
the boundary.
Okay, so to 146 is at least the same distance. If it's more, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's might have an extension, but yeah, it's significantly further than the 18 meters we would.
Yeah. So you would consider that wouldn't be that wouldn't cause a privacy issue, that distance.
Yeah, under our.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think Councillor. Yeah, that's really all I wanted to establish. Councillor Mason wanted to look at the other side of the property, didn't he? I think the street view of the property.
Okay. So is that all your questions, Councillor?
Yeah, that's it. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Mason, questions for Ms. Green?
No questions. It's just really procedure. I'm judging a view that we've got a sort of one problem for the front, another problem from the back. And would the back be allowed without the front?
No. No.
No.
Just to let you know, Councillor Masson, I kind of picked up that when your previous comment, when we're determining the application, as it was stated as part of the procedure, we're here to look at the application in its entirety. We're not there to make it acceptable in terms of saying, well, we'll have one window and not the. It's either all or nothing.
Okay. So. Okay. Happy. Yeah.
Okay. So, have you any questions from a screen? No.
No, I'm happy. I've got the information.
Okay, and to be honest, I'm quite comfortable with the information that we've already heard. So there's nothing further that I really need to interrogate with Ms. Green. So in accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. So we're now at the stage of members just to discuss it and to make a determination on it. Councillor Bell, do you want to kick off?
Yeah. So I mean, having looked at this, my main concern really was for this privacy issue, and that doesn't appear to be a problem. So so looking at that's the west elevation, the east elevation. I don't think it materially affects the other properties in that street. To be honest, so I'm content. I'm more than happy with the information that we have, and I'm not. Can I say more?
Well, you can if you want, or I can take Councillor Mason in first, or if you want to. We're obviously getting to the point where we will decide how we feel we wish it to be determined, i.e. either to refuse or uphold or to overturn the officer's recommendation. So
yeah, so that's the sort of, I think that's all I wanted to say just now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mason, do you want to?
Okay. Well, I'm of view that I have no problem with the quality build and what they're trying to do, but I do have a problem with the fact that it's context in a excuse me.
Oh, he's gone. If we just wait one moment, he's obviously had to go and get something.
I thought I could hear an alarm going on.
Yeah, that's what I thought. We'll just wait 2 moments and he'll come back.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Good. No, I have no problem about the general build of quality materials and this sort of thing, but I do have a problem with the elevation looking onto the main road, looking forward, which is what the west elevation, in terms of compliant with the historic nature of that area and the conservation area concern, in as much as it would be exceptional in that street to have a dormer of this style. In fact, any dormer doesn't look right on those buildings, consistent with the rest of the street. So overall, I wouldn't be in favour of this development.
Okay. Perhaps if I could add in, obviously, we went through the various policies, H1, D1, and obviously we've got to give due consideration to our duty as a local authority to improve and enhance the character of conservation areas. Now, probably like both of you, I'm less offended by the rear elevation in terms of the dormers. I'm not a great fan of box dormers, but I do understand the need to be able to create a living space and to make these houses work for today's, living house styles. But, I do agree with the officer's recommendation that the front elevation is the main part that and I think from hearing from yourself, Councillor Mason, you're also concerned about, because I don't think it gives due consideration to the context. And I do think it's alien or incongruous to its surroundings. So as we've heard, that we're not at liberty to be able to say we'll approve one bit and not the other. It is the entirety of the application. And I think on balance, because of the impact of the front elevation dormers, I think I would certainly be moving that we refuse the application. But what I think we could also state as the LRB is that we would be comfortable with consideration if a further application was to be submitted by the applicant for consideration to the rear elevation being more aligned with potentially what they were saying, but again, ensuring the right materials were used that fitted in with the conservation area, and any tweaks that we felt that would allow it to, as I say, fit in with the conservation area. I know that we did some on Crown Street where we had the 2 windows interlinked with a middle section, and I think we did one not that far away around in Ferry Hill, but I think this one just doesn't work from the front elevation, and the treatment to the rear can always be slightly different different to obviously our considerations of the front, which is obviously highly visible from the public area on the footpath and on the road, and even further afield. So I think it's with that I would certainly be upholding the officer's recommendation, but with us being minded that if something was to come back with a modified application, concentrating more on the rear rather than changes to the front elevation, that, you know, we would be more comfortable. I think that would be fair to say. Councillor Bell, have you got anything else you want to add?
So I think I concur with what you're saying, so the rear elevation, we're talking about the west elevation now, aren't we?
Well, the one that's facing the back gardens.
Yeah, okay, so that's the one that's got the three dormer window, as opposed to the three separate three dormer windows.
Would you like Ms. Green to bring up that picture again, just to give?
Yeah.
Just a moment.
Thank you.
That's the rear.
Yeah.
Elevation.
Right. Okay. So you're saying to do more to that roof?
No, not to do more. That consideration, if they wanted to extend into the roof space, could
Right.
be that there's a discretion. There's a level of suggestion in some of the guidance that it could be a more of I suppose an intrusion into the character of the building at the rear of a building in terms of windows than at the front. I mean, it still has to be in terms of size and everything and scale appropriate. But if we look at the officer's recommendation, they didn't say that the reason that they were recommending it for approval was about the adverse impact amenity of the surrounding area. There was no mention of privacy. So, you know, the suggestion there is that they're not complaining that rear elevation, even in its current context with the proposal, would have created a privacy, and Ms. Green actually demonstrated that in terms of our standard window to window ratio, that actually this was more than adequate. So it wasn't about saying that the dormer window exactly as it is acceptable, but what we're saying is we could see a bigger intervention to the rear. And we're very uncomfortable with the intervention to the front, is what I'm reading from yourself, Councillor Mason. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I mean, the architectural feature of the area and thing is demonstrated mainly by the front of the buildings, not necessarily the back.
Okay, Camina. So the front is the west elevation, then, isn't it? Where there's that just three dormers as opposed to the three sets of dormers.
Do you want to see the front elevation? It's just a. There you go.
Yeah, that. So that overlooks the street.
That's the west elevation. Yeah, that's facing the street.
Okay, and so that was the one that Councillor Mason thought actually had a big impact on the street.
It's a conservation area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
yeah.
Sure. I'm just trying to get that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
All right. So probably if we can sum up now. So Councillor Mason, would you just like to formally say what your position is on this?
Yes, I would refuse the appeal, and because of it not being in keeping with the conservation area and
so basically upholding the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, I'm holding a recommendation. Yeah, correct. Yes.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
I think on the balance of what I've heard, I would uphold the officer's recommendation as well.
Okay, and likewise, I think the officer has made the salient points, you know, and as much as we want these houses to be fit for purpose for 21st century living, I think the balance has to be between the protecting the character and the amenity of the conservation area and enhancing it. And I know that certainly Historic Scotland have often had us add quite quirky extensions onto historic buildings to show the definite change in the timeline online, but it tends to be individual buildings rather than maybe large conservation areas. So I think the officer has tried to find a balance and hasn't completely dismissed the rear elevation, but because, like us, they have to determine the application as a whole, they have also recommended, as I say, refusal, and I'm comfortable to uphold the officer's recommendation. So I believe that's a unanimous decision. Mrs. McBain, do you want to do any verbal call, or are you comfortable that you have the information?
I can easily just do a quick run through for the recording.
Thank you.
So if members can just advise that they're willing to refuse the application. So convener?
Yeah, refuse that application, uphold the officer's recommendation, and show a willingness for some sort of intervention to the rear at a future application should it come in.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Bell?
Yes, I would concur with that as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Mason?
Agreed with that.
Okay, thank you. So the application is refused in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the first application. If we now can move on to the consideration of the second review in respect of the decision to refuse an application for the formation of a driveway to the rear of 128 Hammerfield Avenue, Aberdeen, reference 211190. We'll now hear from the planning advisor, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal. I would point out that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any views or merits of the proposed development, and in fact, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Over to yourself, Ms. Green.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen again.
Thank you. That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, this review relates to a request for review against refusal under delegated powers of an application for formation of driveway to the rear at 128 Hammerfield Avenue. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant has indicated on the notice of review that no new matters have been raised in the review submissions. And in terms of procedure by which the review would be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that a site visit is critical to understanding the road safety issues involved. So I'll just provide some more background to the case before handing back to you, convener, for members to discuss the case and ask any questions. There's a site location plan, and the driveway is here at the end of the plot, going out onto the rear lane, fronts onto Hammerfield Avenue. So the application site is the rear garden of the upper floor flat within a 2-storey building containing 2 flats and fronting onto Hammerfield Avenue. The garden is bound at the rear by a lane serving properties along Hammerfield Avenue and Duthie Terrace, and there's a granite wall bounding the rear garden. There's no planning history to the site. Just show you the overhead. And that's looking up the lane from Duthie Terrace. The driveway would be coming in here, just to the left of the telegraph pole. So this is the detailed planning permission that's sought for the formation of the driveway to the rear of the building, and it's proposed to remove the section of granite wall measuring 2.7 metres wide. And this, along with the removal of the existing bushes and vegetation, would accommodate the proposed driveway, which would measure 3 metres wide by 5 metres in length, and it would have a porous paved finish. A note within the proposed plan states that a mirror would be mounted on top of the boundary wall to give views of oncoming vehicles and pedestrians along the lane. And it should also be noted that planning permission is not required for the demolition of the boundary wall. just show you, that's an older photograph from Google, showing the driveway going in, would be going in there. This from the applicant's statement, and that's looking the other way along the back lane. The rear gardens of properties on Hammerfield Avenue are just on the left here, so that the driveway would be going in where that person's looking. And then looking the other way up the lane, rear gardens of Hammerfield Avenue are on this side. Moving on to the layout plan, as showing the driveway here in the corner of the plot. So the appointed officer's reasons for refusal, which are stated in full in the decision notice and included in the agenda pack, these make reference to the following factors. That the proposed driveway would result in an unacceptable impact on road safety. And secondly, that it's therefore contrary to the supplementary guidance, transport and accessibility, and therefore with the provisions of policy T2 in the adopted plan and T3 in the proposed plan, in relation to the location of the proposed access, and that the appellant's case, just showing the opening in the wall for the driveway. Sorry, yeah, the reasons for a decision and the appellant's case. These again are set out in the notice of review along with the statement. And the central points that are made are that the appellant disagrees that the proposal would result in an unacceptable impact on road safety, because there are very few vehicles using the lane. Vehicles approaching from Duthie Terrace to the southwest would be able to see the driveway from a distance of over 50 metres, and that any vehicle exiting the drive would, which they state would be in a forward gear. Vehicles exiting the drive would similarly see those approaching from Duthie Terrace. Whereas vehicles approaching from the north would need to slow down, the applicant says, to 5 to 10 miles per hour to navigate the 90-degree corner, and would be travelling very slowly when they approach the site. Similarly, it's stated that vehicles exiting the driveway would have the use of a mirror mounted on a pole, and if they didn't have use of the mirror, the vehicles would be approaching at a slow speed, which would mean there would be little chance of accidents. And lastly, the applicant states that they wish to buy an electric car, and this would make charging easier. In terms of consultations, the roads development management team had concerns regarding complex turning manoeuvres within the lane, close to that junction corner of the lane. However, as the proposal is on a private road, the Roads Authority cannot object to the proposal. There were no comments from the Community Council, and there were 5 representations in terms of the application and 1 further set of comments received from one of those who'd objected. The matters raised being the increase in traffic with associated noise and risk to pedestrians, concerns regarding ownership of the wall that was proposed to be demolished, potential damage to underground telecoms cables, concerns regarding legal rights to perform vehicle movements on the lane, demolition of the granite rubble wall, which would detract from the historic amenity of the area, additional vehicle movements that would exacerbate the poor condition of the lane, concerns regarding damage to the garage and garden wall at 286 Broomhill Road as a result of the proposed works. There were 2 representations in support of the application. First one stating that creation of additional off-street parking would make parking on street easier for all residents on Hammerfield Avenue, and that secondly, there are already a number of properties on both Hammerfield Avenue and Duthie Terrace sides of the lane that benefit from garages and driveways accessed from the rear lane. The additional comments made in respect of the review were that during the hours of darkness, the mirror wouldn't function properly, leaving walkers at risk. Secondly, that the corner is blind from both approaches and that users of the driveway would have to concentrate on navigating the corner and cannot use the mirror at the same time. Third reason given is that only one of 3 nearby garages is used for storing vehicles, that there's no guarantee the applicant would reverse park, and that rights to use the lane for vehicles and pedestrian purposes exist. If permission was granted, that would risk increasing the changes that the chance that others would exercise their rights. So I'll now hand back to you, convener, for the panel to consider how you wish to proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members will note that the applicant has stated in the review document that a site visit should take place before determination. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that a site visit be undertaken, that further written information is to be provided, or that a hearing be arranged. Councillor Masson, I'll ask you first.
Yes, convener, thank you. I think I wouldn't mind a site visit, but I have a question first, which may give me some bit more knowledge. We're making a planning permission decision on the creation of a drive, and the consequence of that is the increase in traffic situations, maybe risky or otherwise. To pedestrians, but the traffic authority has no authority over that decision because it's a private property. So are we in a situation that if suppose the back lane was adopted, would the same the use of that street would be upgraded and the traffic might be increased, and will result in consequences of having that drive open will be increased danger. So I'm trying to work out what permission we're trying to decide. Is it planning itself in terms of a drive, or are we actually having to take in consideration the traffic situation? Question. Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't make sense.
There was 1 or 2 words in, I think, that might have confused slightly. Things like adopted. We're not looking at adoption of anything or changing the layout of the lane itself. It's purely the approval of a driveway. But Ms. Green, you might want to add to it.
Yes, I mean, road safety is a valid reason for us to give in refusing or approving the application. Road safety is a material consideration. I think maybe it have confused the issue by mentioning that the roads team didn't object because it wasn't an adopted street. I think that's just they still advise that it's a road safety issue. They just haven't objected because it's not a formally adopted road, but it is still a material consideration for us.
Okay, that's clarified my muddy thoughts. One further question is the access to the lane open at both ends, both ways, if that makes sense?
Yes, you can drive along it on Google Street View if
so we could
do that.
Yeah.
If you wish.
That's what I was going to say. If a Google Street View would be helpful. I mean, I did go and have a look, but I did look at it also in Google Street View, Councillor Mason, and you can see the whole length of the lane. You can actually, physically go along it with the sort of drone or whatever went along it. So we can see that, which might answer any queries you have in terms of deciding whether you want a site visit. So Ms. Green could bring that up just now, just to let you see if that would suffice.
Thank you. Let's have a look.
Okay, thank you.
Right. We start at Duffy Terrace.
Yeah.
So that's where the driveway would be at the end there. Oh, gone the wrong way. So that's the driveway. Turn around and just look back at it. Be coming out at the corner where the vegetation is. And then, shall I just continue?
Yeah, please.
And this is 2011, so it's missed turning. And that's Hammerfield Avenue.
Okay, is that helpful, Councillor Masson?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So with that in mind, are you still suggesting you'd like a site visit, or do you feel that gives you sufficient information?
No, I think I've got sufficient info. I don't think we've too much gain from site visit.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Lena. I'm slightly confused. Not an unusual sensation, I have to say. So one of the objections is applicant does not have legal rights to perform vehicle.
Councillor Bell, sorry, can I just interrupt you? At the moment,
Yes.
what we're trying to do is ascertain whether we have sufficient
Oh,
information.
yes, I've got sufficient information. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And I'm equally content that I've got enough information so that we won't require a site visit or any other procedure to take place prior to determining. So if we can then move on to now that we've decided that we do have sufficient information to take the decision and that no further procedure is required, and we've said why, we will now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant policies and other considerations for this review, and then we can take questions. Back to yourself, Ms. Green.
Thank you. I'll just continue sharing the presentation. So turning to policy considerations, in terms of the adopted local plan, the site's zoned under policy H1 residential areas. However, that policy is not particularly relevant in this case for the driveway. It's not overdevelopment, etc. So if we just move on to policy T2. This really just refers to the supplementary guidance, which should be read in conjunction with the policy. And similarly, policy T3 just refers us to the guidance, transport and accessibility as well in the last paragraph. So looking at that guidance, it indicates driveways should be between 5 and 7 meters in length and at least 3 meters wide. So the size would comply with that. Driveways must be positioned to enable the required visibility, including pedestrian visibility, and driveways that do not meet the requirements will be refused. It states that formation of accesses off rear lanes can usually be achieved satisfactorily, and that position of access needs to be given careful consideration in terms of the effect on safety and efficiency of the lanes. So points for consideration in terms of a decision. Road safety was the reason for refusal. So to what extent do members consider there's an impact on road safety? And in considering that, there are two relevant policies, T2 in the adopted plan, T3 in the proposed plan, which both refer to the supplementary guidance. Thank you. I'll hand back to you, convener.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Bell, have you any questions from the screen?
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, it could be more a legal question. So we are told the applicant doesn't have legal rights to perform vehicle movements over objector's land, nor to remove bushes from ransom strip. Is that correct?
I'll take legal in because it's not
Yes,
actually
okay.
a planning
Yes.
consideration.
No,
But
no,
Mr.
no,
Templeton, would you?
Yes, sorry. So I would say that the ownership or the rights relevant to what they're allowed to do would only really be relevant if we're looking to exert control over the development in some way through conditions or a Section 75 agreement. So I don't think that's actually the case here. So we're really just looking at if they were to do that sort of maneuver or try and do this development, would it be acceptable? And whether they actually can or cannot do it legally isn't really relevant to the planning determination.
Right. Could I then ask Mr. Templeton? There's a ransom strip with bushes that needs to be removed. So that is a legal consideration, isn't it? No?
Would it be proposed that we would require those to be removed, or
No.
Because it would only come down to whether we had a reason to require something to be done as part of the approval, and I don't think if they need to do that in order to actually affect the permission, then they're going to have to do it, and whether they have legal rights to do that or not, it would be a question for them to make sure that they do it legally.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. So another question, if I may, and no, not legal this time.
Okay.
Glad to know.
This could well be a road safety issue. So looking on page 73 of the pack, if you could perhaps bring that up so you can share that.
Sorry, what's on page 73? Got
page 73. So that's the proposed layout, and it shows a car manoeuvring. It shows the car parking area. It also shows an existing garage as well. It's 70. Yep, that's the one. Very good. So looking at that, so I'm just thinking this through. So the car would come in, it would then go into the lane, it would then reverse into the parking slot. That's the idea, isn't it?
Mm.
So how would it then exit? Would it then drive forward and reverse out, or would it drive along the lane? Do you see what I'm driving at? Sorry.
Just drive out.
On the path. But it would
mean,
have to reverse out though, wouldn't it? It would come forward, it would then reverse out.
It would, well, it
Or
could
it would use the lane.
proceed out to Duthie Terrace. It could go out that way.
It would go out.
Yeah.
Run one-way system, so it could reverse in and then drive straight forward.
I think it's about being able to leave the driveway in a forward maneuver as opposed to reversing down it.
Sure. Okay. So that clearly is a material consideration of how it would actually operate, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, obviously we can't control whether they do reverse into the driveway, but if they did, then they could head out southward to Duthie Terrace, or they could presumably turn.
Or they could drive up the lane straight in, then reverse out, and yeah. So
yeah.
Okay. So as long as you can use that back lane, then makes it work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Masson.
Yes, one thing that is not on that diagram we're looking at the moment is the telegraph pole.
It is. If you look next to the red line, it's got a little line coming from it. See for Mrs. Green's?
Oh, just there.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's okay. So it's tucked in the corner there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've got. I think I've got all the information I need for whatever.
Okay.
Don't think there's any questions at the moment.
Right. I don't have any questions Thank you very much, Ms Green. So in accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. So we'll now go on to discuss and determine the application and state our reasons why. I suppose I've been putting you in the hot seat, Councillor Bell, so maybe I should kick off for once. I actually, having gone and had a site visit here, a lot of the considerations or objections from 3 of the objectors were around matters that don't form material considerations, such as the ownership, the underground cables, legal rights, demolition. We heard from Ms Green that the demolition of the wall doesn't require planning permission, so they can demolish it. And any conditions over the lane that seems to be of legal title or anything like that, that's a matter for them to pursue with each other. It's not for the local authority to be involved in. Equally, the damage to any other properties, again, is a private matter, not for the local authority to determine. So really, we're down to kind of the main ground is, do we feel that there's a safety concern? Now, if you recall when we did that sort of flyby with Google Street, or whatever you want to call it, we saw there was a large number of garages and driveways on both sides of the lane currently. We have a garage immediately around the corner if you're coming from Duthie Terrace, which would be completely blind from them coming out if they were using the garage. Now, we have heard, I think it was actually the objector said that a number of the garages are not used for cars, but perhaps just storage, which would suggest then there's maybe not quite as many cars using that facility. The suggestion that this could encourage other people to do it, again, is not a planning consideration for us to determine. We're only here to say if we are comfortable that what's being proposed doesn't worry us about or doesn't concern us over the safety grounds. And to be perfectly honest, I don't have an issue. It's not, I can understand where roads are coming from when a driveway is coming out onto a main public road or crossing a public footpath. But this is a back lane that enjoys vehicular access currently. And I think one more car is not going to tip the balance. I think actually if we had a mirror, other people might even benefit from it. But just the way that the lane narrows there, I would agree actually with the objector that anybody that's treating that lane in the manner they should be and how they use it will not cause an accident. You know, either the person going into that driveway or anybody else, whether it be by foot or by car. I really don't think that this is a concern for me. The fact that you know, there's no parking, individual parking on Hammerfield Avenue, and the applicant wants to have an electric vehicle, you know, so in terms of being able to charge it, to be able to have that access from the rear of his property would allow this. So I'm actually quite comfortable with this application. I really don't believe that one car, having looked along that lane, will be detrimental, and I think most of the grievances that we've seen from most of the residents are private matters and not for the authority. And whilst I appreciate that the roads have made their points, I feel that's more relevant to a main road. And we did hear that usually you can achieve access for driveways on a rear lane, and I don't actually believe that this one would cause a problem. So I'd be happy to overturn the officer's recommendation on this occasion. Councillor Masson.
Thank you, Vina. Yes, I mean the only concern, I agree with more or less what you've just summed up quite well, which you do usually very well.
Thank you.
The only consideration would be if for some reason this got adopted and upgraded so that the speed down the track would be, you know, doubled or trebled, and that might cause the situation. But the probability of that happening in our lifetime, or certainly in my lifetime, will be quite small. And I suspect people use the track as little as possible. And there's no sign of it being used as a rat run from whatever. And so I will in extreme terms, it would be a safety hazard. But given the total lack of traffic there and the situation, I don't see there going any great harm in letting it, as you say, just one extra car back into that. It is in fact it's quite a different manoeuvre, and it's on the corner, so everybody will be going quite carefully. Even dog walkers would be quite careful, I think.
Yeah, and just to reassure you, Councillor Masson, to be able to make that up to adoptable standards, I think would be impossible, because you have to have pavements and lighting and everything else. So I don't think that lane in any shape or form would ever be physically able to be put up to adopted, never mind the council wanting any more adopted roads financially.
Convener, I thought you were a politician and never say never.
No, I'm just going by the practicalities rather than.
Yeah,
But
no,
thank you.
Indeed. I mean, I think it'd be to refuse it on the evidence we have would be unreasonable, I think.
I think so. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, to refuse the planning permission on the information we have wouldn't be very good. I don't think. I can't see that there are any safety issues. The lane is quite wide. It's that provides an in route and an out route, whichever way you're going, as it were. Having an electric car, having a car off road, I think is all good, and I would be happy to actually allow this planning permission.
Okay, thank you, members. So just to conclude, the committee is prepared, or the LRB is prepared to overturn the officer's recommendations. Ms. Green, before we just conclude that and have the vote, can I just check, is there any conditions that you think would be necessary?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I suppose there's the mirror, but I mean, it's not really ideal to condition that, because it's...
No. Okay, you're comfortable with the description of the materials to be used?
It's porous paving.
Yeah.
I think I don't think we need any further detail of that.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, Ms. McBain, do you want to just go to the verbalised decision?
Yeah, thank you, Convener. So if members can just indicate that they're happy to uphold the appeal, therefore overturn the officer's recommendation. So basically to approve the application, sorry. So Convener.
Approve, thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Approve.
Thank you. And Councillor Mason.
Approve.
Approved. Okay, so it's unanimously approved with no conditions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. McBain. Just moving on. Sorry, I'm just getting to the final one for today. Okay, we will now turn to the consideration of the third review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the formation of a driveway to the front with associated landscaping, partially retrospective, at 341 Great Western Road, Aberdeen, planning reference 210799. We'll now hear from the planning advisor, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal. Again, I would point out that Ms. Green's attendance today provides us meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance is because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any views on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms. Green, if I could pass to you.
Thank you. Just share my screen.
That's it, thanks. It is there, so you know.
Yes, no, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up my notes, which is just...
All right. Technology, you see.
Right. Yeah, I've got the wrong reference on the first slide. Apologies for that.
That's okay.
This is application 210799, request for review against refusal of an application under delegated powers for the formation of driveway to front with associated landscaping, which is partially retrospective at 341 Great Western Road. And the review has been submitted with all necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant has indicated on the notice of review that there are no new matters being raised in the review submissions. And in terms of procedure by which the review can be conducted, the applicant has confirmed contentment for the review to proceed on the basis of the information provided by the various parties. So I'll provide some background information on the case before handing back to you, convener, for members to discuss the procedure. That's the location plan on Great Western Road. And the site includes a detached traditional building with frontage onto Great Western Road. The building has been used as an office since 2012, with the area to the front having been recently resurfaced with the loss of a small garden area, which you can still see just there at the front, and then the parking for 3 vehicles on the other side. That's recently been replaced, and this is the front of the property now. So in terms of planning history, a couple of previous applications, most notably was the 2012 permission for change of use to the office. In terms of the proposal, the application is for the formation of the driveway to the front, partially retrospective, as I mentioned, as the driveway has already been formed with the entire frontage surfaced in tarmac. However, the plans submitted with the application show parking within the eastern part of the frontage area, which has been in existence for in excess of 10 years. So the parking use is exempt from enforcement and can continue. The applicant was seeking permission for this, together with the reintroduction of the garden area to the west side of the frontage. The reasons for the decision are stated in full in the decision notice, and the key points being that tarmac isn't an acceptable finishing material in the conservation area, being detrimental to its character and appearance, and that therefore the proposal fails to have regard to the preservation and enhancement of the character and appearance of the conservation area, and would conflict with the policies listed. Also being contrary to national guidance in Scottish planning policy and historic environment policy for Scotland, as well as the managing change guidance on settings and the Great Western Road Conservation Area Character Appraisal. The applicant's case, which is set out in the notice of review along with the statement, the central points being made are that other properties within the same conservation area have completely tarmac covered frontage areas, and there's a couple of photographs showing other properties. Secondly, the compromise that there's been a failure to take into account the compromise that the applicant put forward by proposing to reinstate the landscape area. The next reason was that the applicant was advised that a pathway should be incorporated between the front door and pavement. However, the reason for that wasn't explained, and it would reduce the area available for parking. And lastly, that the work was carried out due to the unsafe nature of the former concrete and gravel areas. In terms of consultations, the roads development management team had no concern regarding the access or parking as that has existed for some time. They did request that there was drainage incorporated along the edge of the tarmac area at the back of the pavement, and that has been incorporated and exists on the site. There were no comments from the Community Council and there were no representations. So I'll now hand back to you, convener, for the panel to discuss what further procedure, whether you wish to proceed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green. Can I just ask, first of all, Councillor Bell this time, do you feel you have sufficient information to be able to proceed today?
Yes, thank you, convener. I think there's sufficient information.
Okay, Councillor Masson?
Yes, I have. Thank you, convener.
Okay, likewise, I'm quite comfortable that I have sufficient information to proceed today. So with that in mind, if I could then just hand back to Ms. Green to go through the relevant policies and procedures. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, the site is zoned again under policy H1 residential areas, which isn't highly relevant in this case, as the application wasn't refused on the basis of H1. So policy D1, quality placemaking, requires the development to be of a high standard, and it links to the 6 qualities listed on the slide. Policy H4 relates to historic environment and states that the council will protect, preserve and enhance the historic environment in line with national and local policies, and it offers support for high quality design that respects the character, appearance and setting of the conservation area. Transport and accessibility supplementary guidance, which links to policy T2 in the adopted plan and T3 in the proposed plan. This has various criteria within it. And I'll just mention the more relevant ones, taking into account that the parking has existed for more than 10 years and so is beyond enforcement. So the relevant criteria are that no more than 35% of the front garden area may be given over for parking, or 50% if footpaths and other hard surfaced areas are included. And it states that at least 50% of the garden area should be left in topsoil to permit soft landscaping. It recommends that suitable landscaping should be provided to screen both the parking and turning areas, and generally to soften the appearance of car parking. That the design of any turning area should be such that it can be used only for turning and not as additional parking. So there's the Scottish planning policy, which is again to preserve and enhance the character of the conservation area, and the historic environment policy for Scotland principles, and again it's the second and fourth ones that are most relevant. Decisions affecting the historic environment should ensure that its understanding and enjoyment as well as its benefits are secured for present and future generations. And the fourth criteria, that changes should be managed in a way that protects the historic environment, with opportunities for enhancement being identified where appropriate. The HES managing change guidance on settings, this emphasises the cumulative impact on a historic area of a number of small changes. Finally, the Great Western Road conservation area appraisal. This plan shows the conservation area with the site. They're fairly centrally located within it, and the strengths include trees and front gardens contributing positively to views within the area, and then conversely weaknesses, just move on to that, include front garden parking detracting from the character of the area. And just to add that on Google Street View can actually go back in time and look at what used to be on the site before the tarmac, so I can do that if members would like that. In terms of material considerations, the following points are of relevance. In terms of historic environment, do members consider that the proposed works would preserve or enhance the character and amenity of the conservation area as required by Scottish planning policy, the historic environment policy and policies in the adopted and proposed local plans? So I'll hand back to you, convener. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Masson first.
Yes, thank you, convener. On this occasion, we are able to approve with conditions. Or are we really involved here? Given that they've been given options to improve and haven't included those items in their proposal, are we sort of now in the position of refusing as stands, or still providing permission with conditions?
It's quite a complicated one, and I'll take Ms. Queen in because obviously they've got existing use and they've had it for over a period of time. So in terms of the use of it is not the debate. I think it's more to do with the materials, the drainage, and perhaps the planting. Ms. Green, could you maybe as well, maybe because there was obviously a suggestion by the applicant about reinstating planting, if you could maybe give some of that information to Councillor Masson and myself, we'll probably want the same question.
Yeah, I mean, the application includes the planting, so that's fine. The delegated report has some discussion on a path being included between the front door and the pavement, and the applicant being unwilling to add that. So I think if we were to try and condition that, we'd be in a position of needing to take enforcement action, considering that already on site is the area is tarmacked. So I think conditioning something like that would be difficult, because would be, yeah, I don't know what it is you in particular where you would want to be conditioned, but we could be in a position where we were needing to take enforcement action. That's just to bear in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener. So can I ask? So the parking area has been there for 10 years, we were told, and the tarmac has recently been applied. So I can't see any objections in here. So can you tell us how this was brought to light, as it were?
In terms of an application being submitted?
Absolutely, yes, because so this is sorry, you said this is retrospective.
Partially retrospective, yeah.
So is this so the applicants decided they've got to make a retrospective application as opposed to being told that they need to make a retrospective application? Is that how it's happened?
Well, I assume that the applicant wishes to rectify the situation whereby they don't have permission for what's on the frontage at the moment.
All right. Could I ask as well then that, so you were saying, I think, that additional drainage has been included, and that was at our request. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes. It was mentioned in the initial roads comments. I don't know whether it was actually already on site, but it was certainly pointed out that it's now in place, and you can see that on the.
Yes. Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah. All right. So just one final consideration. Is it possible to actually just look along the street, because we're arguing here that so we're being told that permission is being denied because it's tarmacked and it's out of keeping with the surrounding area.
Yeah,
I think there's some pictures as well provided, wasn't there?
There are a couple of pictures.
There was one picture.
197 was one of them.
7.
Which is to just.
I've not got page 197.
Oh, sorry.
I've got a
That's,
picture of. I have a picture of
number
the
199.
parking area.
It's the number of the house. I think it's 197. Councillor Bell.
Okay, well I've got that picture. That's on page 132.
Yeah, that was in the statement.
Right.
I can go along to 197.
Okay.
Thank you.
Or maybe it's street view that we would need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right, so that's opposite Ashley Road.
Oh yeah.
Right, so that's 197 with the white front door. I think the point they were making there was that it's a tarmac finish, because obviously the whole front area isn't tarmac. Then there's the
precedent set then with that.
Well, each application on its own merits, but they're trying to say there's other examples of it, and we don't know when that was done and what the policy was at the time.
No.
That was this is the other one, the dental practice.
Right.
2009 was the application for the change of use to the dental practice, and I think the surfacing was already in place then. Right. That application certainly includes parking at the front and that sort of layout.
Okay. Okay.
Have you any other questions, Councillor Bell?
No, thank you.
Can I just ask, in terms of the landscaping that's being proposed? I know it says a flower bed at the front and grass. Do we know what's in the flower bed? Is it shrubs, or can we, if we were minded to approve that, could that be a condition?
Yes,
that landscaping details. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of covers the question I had in terms of the landscaping. Right, members. Okay, has any other questions for Miss Green? No.
No, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Okay. All right, folks. Well, in accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. So we'll now go on to discuss and make a determination of the application. Councillor Masson, would you like to go first this time?
It's a difficult one because you're half there and half not, and it's difficult where we're at. But given that they were given options to make certain alterations, and it would have maybe even approved at an early stage, if they'd made those alterations, I see any giving them the option to, even as a condition, might complicate matters. So I'm really in the moment feeling that we should refuse this application, unless they come in with an application which does include the items that the officers have suggested.
Okay, perhaps I'll go next. I mean, I think basically the main issue of this application is about the tarmac and the use of the tarmac, because the proposed site plan that's on page 133, which I'm assuming is the application, where there's a flower bed being proposed in this application, the grass, and then some tarmac immediately in front of the house. And I think the main issue is around the materials. They're not proposing doing a separate path other than just a tarmac, a sort of corridor to the door. The drainage, as we know, is already in place from the photograph. So the drainage that has been proposed, they've taken on board and already implemented. They just haven't implemented the landscaping as yet. Is that correct, Ms. Green? Before I mislead anybody yet, that's what that was my deductions from, because as you're saying, Councillor Masson, it's quite complicated because there is an already a use that's been determined and can't be enforced to change. It's purely about the materials that's being used. I've probably got a slightly different take on it. I'm very keen to obviously support that we keep conservation areas in the best way we can. I think Great Western Road has a mixture of uses that deviate away from the original use, such as mainly residential, and that's turned into businesses, dentists, as we've just seen. And I would be content to approve the application subject to a condition around the landscaping, because it goes back to the point in the supplementary guidance where it talks about trying to shield the car parking. We've got to be careful, because obviously from a safety point of view, making sure that it's appropriate landscaping that doesn't prohibit views from either pedestrians walking along and seeing the cars coming out, or the cars going in or whatever. So both for the driver and any pedestrians on the street. I think that kind of the horse is bolted a little bit, the fact that it's been there for such a long time in terms of the driveway, that if we got in adequate landscaping, I'd be content to approve it with that condition. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Camilla. Yes, I would concur with that. It is actually very curious. This is a retrospective application. There's a proposed site plan. It doesn't match the proposed site plan as you've pointed out, and as you say, some appropriate, maybe a flower bed would be appropriate. It's existing. It's hardly going to be torn up now. I would suggest that what's there is what's there, but it could be tidied up though, couldn't it, with a flower bed or whatever. So I would be happy to approve this, but caveated accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. And just to confirm, Lucy, the drainage is in situ, because it certainly looks like it from the picture, but if it wasn't, that would also be something. Just looking at it, certainly looks like it, but
I can see what looks like drainage.
yeah. Okay. That's
Yes.
good. Okay, members. So, Councillor Masson, do you want to add anything?
No, I think we're trying to achieve the same thing. I mean, I can go along with approval with the conditions for the landscaping, whatever, which is the same thing as refusing, and they come back with an additional proposal with landscaping in.
Yeah. Well, the applicant has suggested.
Maybe you're kinder than I am.
Yeah. Well, no, the applicant has actually suggested that they were going to put in some landscaping, but unfortunately, I think that the critical element is about the tarmac for planning officers, and understandably, given it's a conservation area, I think my concern is just the time it's been there, and that, you know, at the end of the day, it's sad it'll be covered in 3 cars, and that, you know, if we have appropriate landscaping, I think we can soften the effect. And there are a few others, and just because there's others that have it, we shouldn't feel compelled to continue down that route. But I do feel that, given its locality, I'm comfortable on this occasion to accept the tarmac with the drainage and the proposed landscaping, which would be conditioned. So I think that is, again, a unanimous decision. Ms. McBain, would you just like to go to the kind of the vote? And again, Ms. Green will supply the appropriate wording for the condition around the landscaping.
Okay, thank you. So if members can please indicate that they're willing to overturn the officer's decision, so therefore approve the application with a condition on landscaping. So, convener?
Approve.
Councillor Bell?
Approve.
Councillor Mason?
Approve.
Okay, so the application is unanimously approved with that condition. Thank you.
Members. Oh, somebody's phone. It's for you. So thank you all very much. That concludes the business of the LRB today. We've had some a real mixture today in terms of challenges to try and decipher, but I appreciate all your efforts, everyone, and thank you, Ms. Green. And